Hungarian Folk Tales. The Wolf's Joke. Once upon a time, there lived a man called Uncle George Fox. This Uncle George Fox had a horse, a sheep, and a pig. But he did not give them anything to eat all winter. They were so skinny by springtime that their bones were sticking out. He ushered them through the gate and said, "Off you go, you'll make good food for wolves, and why didn't you grow fat in wintertime?" But how could they if he didn't feed them? This was overheard by a wolf. When the horse walked past him, the wolf said, "Stop right now and let me eat you. That's what your owner said." "You may eat me if you will, but can't you see I'm all skin and bone? What is it that you want to eat on me? If you let me go on my way, I'll grow fat upon the hillside during the summer, and then you'll have a real feast on me." Well, the wolf let the horse go, and off it went. Then the pig came. The wolf said, "Stop right now and let me eat you. That's what your owner said. What is it that you want to eat on me? I'm nothing but skin and bones. If you let me go, I'll grow fat upon the hillside and return with 6 piglets. That will make a real feast for you." The wolf let the pig go too, and the pig went off. Then the sheep came. The wolf said, "Stop right now and let me eat you. That's what your owner said. What is it that you want to eat on me? I'm nothing but skin and bones. If you let me go, I'll grow fat upon the hillside and make a real feast for you when I return." The wolf let it go too and did nothing all summer but wait for the 3 animals to return as they said they would. He lounged about, moving from bush to bush all summer. Autumn came, and one day he saw the pig trot along with 6 piglets. 6 lovely piglets. The wolf saw them from under a bush. He rejoiced at the thought of the feast he was about to have. He emerged from under the bush and went to greet them. "Jolly good you didn't deceive me. I've been looking forward to eating you all this time, and now I'll have my feast." Then the pig said, "If I had meant to deceive you, I wouldn't have come this way, but there's one small problem." "What is it?" "There was no one up on the hillside, and so the piglets haven't been christened yet. They ought to be christened first because it's not good to eat them like this." "Where can they be christened?" "Here in the village. The priest will do it." "Oh, all right then. Take them to the priest, have them christened, and bring them back." The pig set off with the piglets in tow. Then the pig turned back and said to the wolf, "Come here, let me whisper in your ear what the name of each one will be. You'd better know." The wolf did as bid, holding its ear close to the pig's mouth. The pig was in high spirits, grabbed the wolf's ear and began to tug away at it. The 6 piglets followed suit and almost tore the wolf to pieces. He could hardly manage to get away. They then went off and the sheep came. "I hope you won't deceive me," the pig did. "If I had wanted to deceive you, I wouldn't have come this way." "Stop then and let me eat you. At least you'll make a good feast for me." "You may eat me if you will, but there's a slight problem." "What is it?" "You know something. If you begin to chew me, it will hurt me, but it will also give you a toothache. Stand in that hole, hold your mouth wide open so I can hop into it, and you can just swallow me." The wolf stood in the hole and opened his mouth. The sheep prepared itself, took a nice long run, and hit the wolf so hard that it somersaulted like a ball. Then the sheep leapt over it and ran off. Then came the horse. The wolf stood in front of it and said, "At least you had better not deceive me. 2 animals have already done so." "If I had wanted to deceive you, I wouldn't have come this way." "All right, stop then and let me eat you." "You may eat me if you will, but there's a tiny problem." "What is it?" "A maiden is getting married in the next village, and I've been asked to take the bride around. When that's over, I'll come here and you can eat me." "Well, I wouldn't mind seeing that for myself. I mean, how you take the bride around. Come and see for yourself. How can I? Hop on my back. So the wolf sat on the horse's back and the horse took it into town. A man in the village was known by the name of Uncle Andrew Duncan. In summertime, there were always men playing cards in his yard. They were playing cards as usual when the horse passed in front of the gate with the wolf on his back. The people saw the wolf on the back of the horse and began to shout, "Look there, a wolf on the back of a horse! Look there, a wolf on the back of a horse!" Each one of them reached for a stick or an axe. The horse slowed down so that the people could catch up with it. This they did, and the poor wolf had a hard job trying to get away without being battered to death. There was a man in the village called Uncle Pete Kalan. He was gathering wood in the forest when he saw the wolf approaching. So Uncle Pete Kalan swiftly hid behind a big tree so the wolf wouldn't see him. The wolf happened to sit down under that very tree, keeping his eye on the village in the distance. Then he began to say to himself, "It serves me right. I was so foolish. I wish someone would hit me right now." Uncle Pete Kalan hit him so hard with the axe that the wolf was almost knocked dead. "Heavens," the wolf said. "It was only meant to be a joke." Hungarian Folk Tales. The Dyer's Apprentice. Once upon a time, there lived a woodcutter with his wife. On a fine spring morning, the woman gave birth to a baby boy. By the time the lad turned 13 years of age, the woodcutter died. The boy and his mother were very poor. Finally, the young boy walked into the village looking for a job. There he came upon a dyer who hired him as an apprentice. He earned only very little as an apprentice, but he always gave every penny to his mother. Suddenly one morning he turned to his mother. "Mother, I had a dream last night." "Tell me all about it, my son." "I cannot talk about my dream before it is time, even if my life depends on it," he said. "Well, all right." In the morning the boy went to see his master, told him that he had had a dream, but he never revealed what his dream was about. The master got angry and started beating his apprentice. The boy ran out to the street, but the master rushed after him with a whip in his hand. At that very moment in time, the king was passing by in his gilded carriage, and he called to the master, "Hey you, why are you beating that young man?" The master told the king everything, one by one. Finally, the king ordered him to hand over the boy to him, and he would find out what the dream was all about. Once they got to the king's court, the young lad was literally bathed in milk and honey. 3 weeks later, the king summoned the boy and asked him how he liked being in the palace. "I quite like it here," replied the boy. "Well, you see, son, I am trying my best to please you," said the king. "What about pleasing me a little?" "Oh, your majesty, I will do whatever I can to please you, but what can I do if it isn't possible?" "All right then, all you should do is tell me what you dreamt the other night." "Oh, your majesty, that is an impossible task, because even if you take my life, I cannot reveal my dream to you before it comes true." And so it went on and on for 7 years, but all was in vain. Finally, the king lost all hope and patience and had the boy walled in. In the meantime, the king's daughter also grew up to be a beautiful girl, and she fell in love with the boy. She stole a purse filled with gold coins from her father and gave it to the bricklayer. She instructed the man to leave a small opening in the wall. Through that small opening, she gave food to the young boy 3 times a day. She kept feeding him every day for another 7 years. In the meantime, the Turkish Sultan announced he wished to marry the princess, but the old king did not want to hear about it. The Sultan sent 3 identical donkeys to the king, asking him to identify the exact age of each animal. Otherwise he would attack and destroy the king's country. The king was frightened and he ran around asking everybody for a solution. But nobody was able to tell the exact age of the donkeys. As the daughter was carrying lunch to the boy behind the wall one day, she told him what had happened. In the end, the boy told her not to worry. He told her to go home and sleep through the night. And when she awoke the next morning, she should tell her father the following. Give the donkeys oats that are 1, 2, and 3 years old. The animals will eat the oats that correspond with their own age. And so it happened. The king was happy that he finally managed to save his country. But the Turk just couldn't rest. He wrote another letter to the king with the following message. This time I am sending you a stick with bludgeons on both ends. He wrote, if you cannot tell which is the upper and which is the lower end of the stick, I am going to have you decapitated. The king's joy suddenly turned to sorrow. In the meantime, the princess dreamt that if they tied a single hair around the middle of the stick and lifted it, the lower end, which was thicker, would bend towards the ground. They immediately sent a letter with the answer to the Sultan. The Sultan was so angry he nearly had a fit, but he could still not rest. He sent another letter plus 3 penknives asking the king to identify which of the knives belonged to a gentleman, a soldier, and to a peasant. Once again, the princess dreamed up the solution. She said that the knives should be stuck into the ground next to a burning fire. The one that smells like garlic belongs to a peasant. The one that smells of scent belongs to a gentleman. And finally, the one that oozes blood must belong to the soldier. The king was overjoyed and sent a letter to the Turkish Sultan. The Sultan never sent another letter. The king was curious to find out how his daughter always knew the right answers. Finally, his daughter confessed everything, and the king ordered his men to tear down the wall. Everyone was happy, and they held a magnificent wedding in the palace. As they were eating, the king once again asked the apprentice to tell him what his dream was all about. "This was my dream, Your Majesty," he said, pointing to his bride and the wedding ring. And they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Golden Lamb. Once upon a time, there lived a poor man and his son. When the boy grew up, his father sent him away to work and earn some money. Off he went and searched for a place where he could work until he finally found a farmer who hired him as a shepherd for his sheep. The next day, his new master handed him a flute and sent him out with a flock to see if he knew what to do. Unlike the other lazy shepherds, the young lad never rested for a minute and herded the sheep and played the flute all day long. Among the sheep was a lamb with a golden fleece. Whenever the young lad played his flute, it began to dance. The boy grew to like the lamb so much, he decided to ask for the golden lamb instead of wages. As night fell, he took the flock home. The farmer stood waiting for him at the gate, and when he saw that none of his precious sheep had gone astray and all had eaten well, he was a happy man indeed. The boy and his master began to debate his wages. The lad said he would like the golden lamb. The master liked the little animal very much, but eventually agreed to let the boy have it because he was willing to work very hard. A whole year passed by. The boy worked well for his master and was given the lamb as his prize. He set off home, but it began to get dark just as he walked into a village. The shepherd boy eventually sought shelter with a farmer who had a daughter who fell so in love with the golden lamb that she decided to steal the animal for herself. It was nearly midnight by the time the girl got her hands on the lamb, but as soon as she touched it, her hand stuck to its golden fleece. The boy woke the next morning and saw the young girl with her hand stuck to the lamb. He did not want to leave the lamb behind, so off he set with the lamb and the girl with her hand stuck to its golden fleece. The three of them danced until they reached the third neighbour's house, where a woman poked her head out and saw the young girl dancing and prancing with the lamb. She rushed outside with her oven shovel and shouted, "Get back home with you and stop making such a scene." The woman smacked her with the shovel. "I said to do as you were told." But the girl carried on dancing, so the woman hit her with her shovel, but it stuck to her behind, with the woman on the other end. The lamb pulled them both through the village, all the way to the church. The lamb started to dance with a girl stuck to its fleece, who had the shovel stuck to her behind, and the woman on the end. The priest was just returning from the church and scolded them bitterly for making such a scene, but to no avail. The priest took his stick and struck the woman's behind with it, and was surprised to see that his stick stuck to the woman's fat bottom and he was glued to the other end. The boy continued to trail them through the village, where a soldier passed with his horse. He touched the priest and got stuck too. Then a weaver came out with a roll of linen. He smacked the horse's flank, and the linen stuck to it in an instant. Then a cobbler appeared with his hands full of boots. He hit the weaver and cried, "What are you staring at?" And he too now was stuck to the procession. The boy blew on his flute, and the lamb went on dancing with the girl stuck to its behind, the shovel stuck to her bottom, the woman to the handle of the shovel, the stick to her bottom, with the priest stuck to the other end, followed by the soldier leading the horse, with the linen stuck to its flank, the weaver stuck to the linen, with the boots on his back, and the cobbler at the very end. And the boy just went on marching with his peculiar parade until he reached a town where everyone was in mourning. The houses and palaces were all covered in black, and the men and women were walking about in black clothes. At the edge of the town, the boy began talking to an old woman and asked her what had happened. The old woman sadly told him that the daughter of the king was seriously ill, and no medicine was strong enough to cure her. The doctors all said that if someone could make her laugh, she would soon be cured, but no one had managed to do it yet. The king declared that anyone who could make his darling daughter laugh could marry her and receive half of his kingdom as a gift of thanks. Of course, there were many people who all wanted to try their luck, princes, counts, and acrobats, from all kinds of nations and nationalities, but no one succeeded. No matter how hard they tried, the princess never even smiled, and they all ended up with their heads impaled on a pole. The next morning, the boy announced that he intended to make the princess laugh. The king was happy to hear the news and asked his daughter to stand outside. The young shepherd began to play his flute. The golden lamb went on dancing with the girl stuck to its fleece, with the shovel on her behind, and the woman stuck to the shovel, the stick on her fat bottom, with the priest stuck to the other end, followed by the soldier with his horse, with the linen stuck to its flank, the weaver stuck to the linen, with boots on his back, and the cobbler at the end of the line. When the princess saw this, she burst out laughing, and that made the golden lamb so happy that it shook everything and everyone off and began to dance alone. And then the girl began to dance, and then the woman, and then the priest, and then the soldier with his horse, and then the weaver, and even the cobbler. The king happily gave his blessing for the shepherd boy to marry his daughter. He gave the weaver and the cobbler royal warrants. He made the soldier his general and the priest his royal cardinal. The woman was promoted to royal baker, and the girl became the princess's maid. The wedding feast went on for a week and a day, and the whole kingdom celebrated the bride and groom. If the violin strings hadn't snapped, they would all still be dancing. Hungarian Folk Tales. Cerceruszka. Once upon a time, there lived a widower who had 2 daughters. His next-door neighbour was a widow who never stopped recommending herself to the man. "Hey, neighbour, take me for your wife. You won't regret it. I will bring up your 2 daughters, and I'll be like a real mother to them." One day, the poor man finally gave in and married the widow next door. But it did not take long for the woman to start treating the girls badly. She tried everything to get them away from the house. She nagged her husband, "Take them both to the forest and just leave them there. Let them perish." That was something horrible for the father's ears, but still, he did as the woman wanted him to. Tsertserushka, that was the name of the elder girl, heard what her father and stepmother were about to do. So she filled her pockets with grain, so she would leave a trail behind. Early next morning, the father took out his 2 daughters. Tsertserushka just kept spilling the grain from her pockets all along the way. When they were deep in the middle of the forest, their father told them, "Well, my girls, I think it's about time to take a rest, because we are all very tired." And the girls went to sleep. When the girls woke up, they started calling their father, but he was already far, far away. "Don't you worry, little sister. We will trace our way back along the grain that I spilled as we came this way." But they couldn't find the grain because the birds had pecked it all up, and the girls just couldn't find their way home. On top of all of that, their stepmother had cursed them before they left. "If you drink from the track of an animal, you are going to change into that animal." As they were walking in the endless forest, the younger girl became thirsty. She spotted the footprint of a cow that was full of clean water. "Sister, oh dear sister, I'm so thirsty, I have to drink." "Don't drink, sister, because you will turn into an animal." A little later, the little girl got left behind and she drank from the footprint of a deer. When Tsertserushka looked back, she saw the little deer running after her. Tsertserushka kept on going forward with the deer following her until she finally found a hollow tree. There she gathered up some dry leaves and made a comfortable bed. One day a young prince was hunting in the forest and he spotted the beautiful Tsertserushka. The prince called after them, "Come on out, you beautiful girl." "I cannot, because I have a dear sister and you want to kill her." "Come on out with the deer. I won't touch her." So Tsertserushka finally came out, and she was so beautiful that the prince was lost for words. When he found his voice again, he immediately asked her to marry him. "Let's get married. I'll be yours and you'll be mine, and we'll live happily forever and a day." He kissed her and embraced her. Then they both got on his horse, and the prince married the girl. Time passed by. The king was on a hunt one day when Tsertserushka gave birth to a son. His name was Little King Andriku. Before I forget what I was going to say, I wanted to tell you that there lived a mean cook in the court who had an ugly daughter. She had always dreamt that her own daughter would be the queen one day, so it was no surprise that she hated Tsertserushka. "Your Majesty, you are so beautiful. There is a pond in the garden. You should go and take a look at yourself." When they walked around the water, the cook suddenly shoved her into the pond. When this was done, the cook woman quickly changed her own daughter's dress and made her lay down in Tsertserushka's bed. Soon the king returned from the hunt. The evil cook told him the good news. "You have a son. His name is Little King Andriku. Just take a look, Your Majesty." The king was very happy and he kissed the baby boy. He was about to kiss his wife, but he was horrified at what he saw. "Oh my goodness, what became of my wife? How could she become as ugly as this?" "It was childbirth that did it to her," explained the cook. The king was sad, but since there was nothing he could do, he finally accepted the change. Each night, Tsertserushka came back and visited the deer in her room. She kept asking, "Is Little King Andriku crying?" "Of course he is, dear sister. Barren women have no milk." One day the cook's daughter heard this. She was determined to get rid of the deer before it caused her downfall. So she said to the king, "Darling husband, I'm feeling very weak. I will feel no better until I can eat the heart and liver of this little deer." "The deer must be killed." As they were sharpening the knife and washing the bowl for her blood, the deer ran out to the pond and called out, "My darling Teterushka, get up from the depths, from the stomach of the big fish, because they want to cut my throat with a knife. They want to catch my blood in a bowl. They want to kill me too." Then Teterushka stepped out of the pond, walked up to the deer, and stroked her gently. She was even more beautiful than before. The king heard and saw everything because he was secretly following the deer. He embraced and kissed Teterushka, who told him everything. The king immediately went to see the cook. He said to the cook, "What would you do to the person who would not hesitate to destroy my wife?" "What? I would have the person tied to a horse's tail and have him dragged through the town." And the old woman and her daughter were treated exactly as the old hag had predicted. The king took Teterushka and the little deer back to the palace, and they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Poor Man and His Fiddle. Far, far away, beyond the high mountain and across the vast ocean, there lived a king who had 3 beautiful daughters. One day the queen said to the 3 daughters, "Off you go, girls, to the forest to pick wild berries, and whoever picks the most will have my red skirt." So off they went, and they picked and picked berries as fast as they could. When noon was near and the sun high, they settled down in the shade of a tree and looked to see which of them had gathered the most. Now the youngest had picked more than her 2 sisters together. The 2 turned green with envy. The youngest sister would have the red skirt. So the eldest of the 3 had this to say, "Girls, girls, come and pick some more, for we cannot go home with so few berries." The youngest argued and argued, for if they went on picking and picking, they would never be home before evening. But her 2 elder sisters insisted that they stay in the forest. And so it passed. Off went the 2 into one part of the forest, the youngest to another. But not to pick berries, for they agreed to kill their younger sister. If they could not have the red skirt, then their sister should not have it either. So they set off after her and took hold of her. She begged and pleaded in vain and offered them all the berries she had, but they killed her. Just when they had taken her life, a blind beggar arrived with his fiddle and bow. The sisters took the fiddle off the old beggar, placed their dead sister inside it, and hid the fiddle in a hole in a tree. Home went the girls and were asked where their sister was. Of course they didn't know. They warned her again and again not to stray into the forest, but she didn't heed them. Who knew? She may have lost her way or even been killed by robbers who live in the forest. In the meantime, a poor man went off to the forest to cut himself some timber. He chopped down the very tree in which the body of the little princess had been placed. The poor man was astonished to see a fiddle spring out of the tree. He took the fiddle into his hands and started to draw the bow on the fiddle, across and up, just like the gypsies did. Now this fiddle was a fiddle that did not just make music, it sang as well. Draw the bow, good and slow, my good fellow, my good fellow. Harm it not, for the fiddle is me. The fiddle you play is Princess Betty. Goodness me, thought the poor man. This fiddle must have a spell on it. Now's my chance to seek my fortune, for a fortune it will be if someone pays to hear this wonderful song. Off set the poor man to wander the whole wide world and earn so much money that an entire cart could hardly suffice to carry it after him. On his travels, he came to the town of the king, whose youngest daughter met a death so cruel. He stopped outside the king's palace and began to play his fiddle. The king heard the wonderful melody and asked a servant to order the fiddler into his palace. The servant ran out and delivered the message, but the musician replied that not one step would he take, for he had more money than the king himself. Back ran the servant to report what the musician had said. There was nothing for it. The king himself stepped out and invited the musician into his palace to play for him. So often did he ask that the musician went in, tapped on the fiddle twice, and started to draw the bow. Draw the bow, good and slow, my good fellow, my good fellow. Harm it not, for the fiddle is me, the fiddle you play is Princess Betty. The king had this to say, a wonder of a song, a wonder. The two princesses were standing by and gaping at the song. One of them took the fiddle and started to play it to see what it would sing for her. Draw the bow, good and slow. You killed me, but no one knows. The other princess took up the fiddle and it sang the very same for her. Then the king took up the fiddle and the fiddle had this to sing for him. Draw your bow, good and slow. Princess Betty loves you so. This is witchcraft for sure. Let me try the fiddle too, said the queen. So she took up the fiddle and started to play, and the fiddle had this to sing for her. Draw the bow, good and slow, mother dear, mother dear. Harm it not, for the fiddle is me, Princess Betty is here, you see. And at that very moment, the fiddle opened up and out jumped the little princess, as alive and as beautiful as a spring flower. The two elder sisters fainted away in fear. The king and queen wept tears of joy for the daughter they had lost and mourned, but had now returned in such a miraculous way. Now that the cruelty of the two elder sisters had come to light, the king locked them up in a tower, there to stay until death took them away. But the little princess begged and pleaded her father until the king relented and had mercy on the two. And from then on, they all lived happily ever